In a small Italian village, surrounded by tall mountains, life moves at a calm and steady pace. Every morning, the sun rises and casts a golden glow on the stone houses, making everything look warm and welcoming. The villagers wake up early to tend to their crops, feed their animals, and greet each other as they head to work. In the afternoon, they gather in the central square to share stories, laughter, and the simple joys of life. To them, this peaceful routine is something precious. One of the most respected people in the village is Father Mason, the local priest. He is known for his kindness and willingness to help anyone in need. If someone is sick, worried, or simply needs advice, Father Mason is always there to offer comfort and guidance. The villagers see him as their protector, someone who listens and understands without judgment. The village thrives on acts of kindness and cooperation. If a neighbor runs out of flour, someone quickly lends some. If a villager falls ill, others bring hot soup and care for them. Children play freely in the streets, while the elders pass down wisdom from generation to generation. The mountains surrounding the village feel like guardians, protecting the small but united community. Father Mason's church is an old stone building, rich with history. Its walls have witnessed countless weddings, baptisms, and moments of prayer. He often walks through its corridors in silence, feeling the deep peace the sacred place provides. More than anything, he cherishes how faith brings the villagers together, strengthening their friendships and their sense of belonging. Despite his responsibilities, Father Mason remains humble. He never lets the respect he receives make him feel superior. Instead, he treats everyone equally, always ready to listen and offer words of hope. His greatest belief is that kindness and compassion can turn life's difficulties into moments of learning and growth. Through his devotion, he brings a sense of harmony to the village, making sure that everyone knows they are never alone. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting a soft golden light over the village, Father Mason finished his daily tasks at the church. He was about to lock the doors when he heard a strange sound, a distant howl. At first, he thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees. But then, the howl came again, this time closer, almost as if calling to him. A strange feeling stirred in his heart, as if he was meant to follow the sound. Without knowing why, he stepped outside, walking through the quiet streets of the village. A few lights flickered in the windows, but most people had settled in for the night. The cool evening air carried a sense of anticipation, as if something important was about to happen. As he neared the church entrance, Father Mason noticed something unusual, a large gray wolf standing right in front of the wooden doors. A few villagers passing by stopped in their tracks, their eyes wide with fear. Mrs. Parker, who had just left the market, let out a small gasp, while Mr. Cooper hesitated on the other side of the street, unsure of what to do. Loves were not common in the village, and their presence so close to the houses was unsettling. Yet, instead of fear, Father Mason felt something else, a deep curiosity. The wolf's eyes held an unusual intelligence, as if it was trying to communicate something beyond words. The animal wasn't aggressive. It simply stood there, looking straight at him. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then, after locking eyes with the priest, the wolf turned and began walking away from the village, pausing now and then to glance back. It was clear it wanted Father Mason to follow. Despite the risks of entering the forest at night, he felt an unshakable pull to go after the creature. The villagers whispered in concern, asking if he was sure about what he was doing. But with a calm nod, he reassured them and took his first step toward the unknown. The deeper Father Mason walked into the forest, the more he became aware of his surroundings. The trees stood tall, their branches casting dark shadows under the moonlight. The night was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant animal calls, and the occasional hoot of an owl. The wolf led him through narrow paths, checking frequently to see if he was still following. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing bathed in silver moonlight. There, lying on the ground, was a wounded she-wolf. Surrounding her were 4 small pups, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. Father Mason's heart ached at the sight. The she-wolf had a deep wound on her hind leg, likely from a hunter's trap. The metal had cut into her flesh, leaving a trail of blood on the grass. Though she was in pain, she still tried to lift her head as the priest approached. The male wolf, who had guided him here, stood beside him, his gaze filled with silent pleading. It was clear now he had brought Father Mason to help his injured mate. Kneeling beside the wounded animal, the priest spoke softly, trying to offer comfort. He pulled out a small canteen of water and some clean cloth from his bag. With gentle hands, he cleaned the wound, whispering reassuring words as he worked. The she-wolf whimpered but remained still, sensing the priest's good intentions. The pups huddled close, watching with both fear and curiosity. Even the male wolf, despite his wild instincts, did not interfere. He trusted Father Mason completely. After wrapping the wound with an improvised bandage, the priest sat back, exhaling deeply. The worst of the bleeding had stopped, but the she-wolf was still weak. She needed rest and care, something she could not get in the wild. Then, the silence of the night was broken by the sound of barking and men's voices. Hunters! Father Mason tensed. The hunters were getting closer, their dogs sniffing the air. The male wolf let out a low growl, standing protectively in front of his family. Without hesitation, the priest gently lifted the injured she-wolf and motioned for the pack to follow him deeper into the woods. Finding a hidden cave, he helped the she-wolf settle down just as the hunters arrived. Flashlights cut through the darkness, and one of the men raised his rifle. Mr. Armstrong, the head hunter, demanded to know why the priest was protecting wolves. Speaking firmly but calmly, Father Mason explained that these creatures posed no threat. They were hurt and needed compassion, not violence. Though reluctant, Mr. Armstrong hesitated. He knew the priest was a man of wisdom and kindness. With a final warning, he lowered his weapon and left, but not without a promise to keep an eye on the wolves. Realizing the forest was still too dangerous, Father Mason made a bold decision. He would take the wolf family to the village. At first, the people were hesitant, but when they saw how weak the she-wolf was and how her pups played innocently, their hearts softened. Slowly, they started helping, bringing food, water, and even making a space in an old barn for the family to recover. Days passed, and the village's fear turned into curiosity, then compassion. Children like Emily spent hours watching the pups play, learning that wild animals were not just something to fear, but creatures deserving of kindness. Even Mr. Armstrong, once set on hunting wolves, began to see them differently. When the she-wolf was finally strong enough, the village gathered to say goodbye. In a small ceremony, Father Mason led the wolves to the edge of the forest. With a silent glance of gratitude, the wolf family disappeared into the trees, free once more. From that day on, the village changed. People spoke of respect for all living creatures, and the mountains no longer seemed like barriers, but part of a world they shared. Father Mason, with his faith renewed, knew he had fulfilled his mission, not just as a priest, but as a guardian of all life.